Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Elephant in the Room seminar series. This is the news media industry and last seminar of the series. So welcome if you're just now joining us. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Angelica Jones, a junior at the University of Florida, studying telecommunications and political science. I'm also the president of the University of Florida's Association for Media Professionals. And to get started, I will start introducing our UF panelists and alumni for this week's seminar, starting with Mindy Marqués. Mindy Marqués is Vice President and Executive Editor at Simon & Schuster and the former President and Publisher and Executive Editor at the Miami Herald. Born in New York to Cuban immigrant parents, Mindy began her career as an intern at the Miami Herald and rose through the ranks to become the paper's first Hispanic editor in 2010, becoming only the second woman to hold this post. During her tenure as executive editor, the Miami Herald won 2 Pulitzer Prizes and has been a finalist 4 times. Mindy is a 1986 graduate of the University of Florida, where she was inducted into the UF College of Journalism and Communications Hall of Fame in 2012. She received the Presidential Impact Award from the National Association of Hispanic Journalists in 2016 and was inducted into their Hall of Fame in 2018. Mindy also serves as co-chair on the Pulitzer Prize Board, the first Hispanic to serve in this capacity. I will now introduce our second UF alumni panelist, Yvette Miley. Yvette is an award-winning journalist and serves as the Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the NBCU News Group in NBC Sports. Yvette has worked for NBC Universal for 27 years and has held several leadership roles within the news group, including Senior Vice President for MSNBC and NBC News, Head of Diversity and Inclusion for NBC News and MSNBC, VP for MSNBC, Executive Editor of MSNBC Dayside, and Executive in charge of the NBC News digital platform NBC Out, the first LGBTQ news vertical created by a major broadcast media organization. Yvette has received 4 Associated Press Awards, 3 Emmy Awards, including an Emmy for the MSNBC and NBC News coverage of the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage in 2016, and the National Association of Black Journalists Chuck Stone Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017. In 2000, she was inducted into the UF College of Journalism and Communications Hall of Fame and was awarded a Distinguished Alumna Award by the President of the University of Florida in 2018. Thank you both for joining us. Go Gators! And I'll turn it over to my co-host Ariel to introduce our Howard University alumni panelist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome again to our seminar series tonight. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our HU panelists, starting with Charanna Alexander-Jean. She is the staff editor for the wedding section of the New York Times, where she also oversees the Love Letter newsletter for the Styles section. Beyond her work with the New York Times, Charanna is a bona fide self-starter. She is the owner and founder of Love Inc., a heart-centered writing and coaching company that helps couples and individuals with sharing their hearts on paper, such as a wedding vow and love letter writing and coaching. She has been featured in The New Yorker, Essence, and Ebony magazine. Charanna believes that writing is one of the best ways to express love for self and others. She received her Bachelor's of Arts from Howard University in Broadcast Journalism and a Master's degree in Digital Media from Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism in New York. Next, we have Khaila Burke-Green. She is a diversity communications and partnerships manager at Comcast NBC Universal, one of the world's leading media and technology companies. In this role, she develops and implements strategic communication plans that deliver against Comcast's corporate agenda to embed diversity and inclusion into all aspects of the company's culture and business. She oversees both internal and external communication programs and provides communications expertise and guidance on topics of race and ethnicity, gender and disability inclusion. With more than 15 years of communications experience, Khaila has held PR, marketing, and advertising positions at large companies, nonprofits, and agencies. She is a member of the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity and Communications and ColorCom, a business community for women of color in the communications industry. Khaila earned a BA in journalism from Howard University, where she graduated magna cum laude, and an MA in strategic communications from Villanova University. Thank you, panelists, for joining us tonight. And now I will turn it over to Kyra Grant, who will introduce our moderator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kyra Nicole Grant. I'm a senior broadcast journalism major and sports administration minor from Jersey City, New Jersey, and I serve as the PR director of HUPRSSA. And I have the honor in introducing a communication executive who will be our UF moderator, Ms. Angela Buonocore. Angela Buonocore is a communication executive who has worked at some of the world's most successful companies, including GE, IBM, PepsiCo, and ITT. Before her retirement in 2014, Angela served as the former chief communications officer at Pepsi Bottling Group, ITT, and Xylem. As a graduate from the University of Florida with a Bachelor of Science degree in advertising, she was inducted into the UF College of Journalism and Communications Hall of Fame in 2007. Today, she serves on the board of Equal Justice USA, whose work is at the intersection of criminal justice, public health, and racial justice. She is also on the board of the Student Press Law Center, an organization that works to promote, support, and defend the First Amendment and press freedom rights of high school and college journalists and their advisors. So welcome, Angela, and thank you so much for being here to everyone. And we can't wait to see what you all have in store.
Thank you very much. It looks like we've used about half of our time with those intros for all of us. But listen, we've been out of school for a while. We're running up the accomplishments, and I know all of you are doing that too. I'm so impressed with all of our student hosts here. You've done an awesome job. We can all take a page out of your book. All right, let's get started. This promises to be an interesting panel with all of these very accomplished folks here. And I'd like to we'll start with a softball question, then we'll go to some of the hardball questions. Let's start with, in this digitally focused media days, I'd like to ask all our panelists, is there a degree that you feel gives people that you're looking to hire more of a competitive advantage? What do you think they should be studying and doing to be most prepared to join the workforce? Let me start with Mindy.
Hi, Angela, and thank you for having me today. It's awesome. I don't think that it's the degree that really is the key. And even though I myself majored in journalism, I think today what students who are looking to be into journalism need is really a range of skills. Quite frankly, it's a range of skills that weren't required of me when I first entered the workforce. But I think the key is to really be able to, the idea of traditional media is really dead as far as I'm concerned. There's no such thing as just a newspaper or just a broadcast station. Everyone's with convergence, everyone is doing everything. So I think that the more skills that someone can bring to the table that brings everything together. I mean, writing at the core of it, because you're going to be writing one way or another, either for online or writing a script or whatnot. But social media skills, video skills. So the more well-rounded, and data skills, I think the more well-rounded a student can come out of the university, the better really poised for an array of jobs across the spectrum of media in the country.
Terrific. Let's go over to Howard and let's ask Khaila what her point of view is on this. Khaila, you're on mute. Could you unmute, please? And then we can hear your point of view.
I knew I would have done that. Yeah.
All right. No problem. So keep it rolling.
I absolutely agree with Mindy. I think that within communications field, journalism field, once you have the basics, there is a lot more latitude now, I think, to be able to move into digitally focused media. I think that, most of the students on this call today are probably members of the I generation, the first generation to spend their entire adolescence in the age of the smartphone. You probably have not known a time without the internet. So in many ways, this means that you are comfortable in the digital space. You guys are natives to this space. and have probably also had the opportunity to use your social media and digital skills in other non-academic areas. I'm sure some of you probably have YouTube channels or are content creators. So I think that all of that experience that carries over. So once you have the basics of journalism, you leverage all of that other natural experience that you have as members of the I generation and in what you do in your day-to-day life. And those are things that you should definitely be mentioning in interviews and are transferable skills that will, give a competitive advantage, I think.
Yvette, let me jump up to you here in the Brady Bunch box. I like to look up to you up there. And please tell us what your thoughts are. You've had a wonderful career and you've done a lot of different jobs. What is it you look for when you interview young people, or maybe not even necessarily young people, some older people that are looking for jobs? What is it you're looking for?
I look for the story beyond the degree. Like, what do you do? Like, I ask people, how would they define themselves? Storyteller, photographer, social media guru. Like, how do you define yourself, right? And most people would define themselves based on that passion or the thing that they love to do. So I like to make sure the degree might be the paper, but what is your purpose? And I don't necessarily look at the degree as a journalism degree or telecommunications. When I graduated a long time ago, it was telecommunications, right? So maybe that doesn't really define who I am and what I do, but that was the degree. So to Mindy's point, I don't think the degree necessarily determines, it's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at what else is beyond the degree. What do you want to do? Who are you? And when you talk about what kind of language do you use to describe the work that you do, right? Does it feel laborious, or does it feel like I got an energy for this? I love this. I'm a storyteller and and then when you're a storyteller, you think about whatever platform, whether it's digital, broadcast, or cable, whether you're writing, you got to have that foundation is key. Are you a good storyteller? Can you write well? Are you a good communicator? So it's not a specific degree. It's what do you
more the skills. Terrific. And I'm going to come to you too, Charanna, and then I won't be asking everybody all the questions, but this one I think is important to get all the perspectives. So can you tell our audience how you feel about this?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the degree, it's less about the degree and more about your experience as a journalist. I found that when I graduated, I was so focused on being a broadcast journalist, and I ended up working in print. So, I had a broadcast journalism major, but it didn't limit me to what I was able to do. I think it's more important to get out there and try different things. I can't stress that enough. Like, if you are in magazine production, if you are in digital, if you are in print, if you're in television, I say if you have the opportunity to get your hands and your feet wet in all of those arenas, I say do that, because when you come to, like everyone has said on the panel, you have to be able to do multiple things. I remember my first day at work at the New York Times, I went in thinking I can write, and they asked me to produce. I was like, wait a minute. Luckily I took, production class and I was able to jump in and start producing videos, but you just have to be able to do multiple things and do it well. So get your feet wet and focus less on the degree and more about having experience in every arena.
Okay, guys, so the messages I heard were pretty consistent here. They were good writers are really always in vogue. There may be traditional media may be out, digital media may be in, but good writers are always in vogue. I heard flexibility as a great message. I heard from Yvette, passion. So let's think about all these things. And one thing I'd like to add, when people used to come and interview with me for jobs, I would always tell them, you create your own brand. So that kind of piggybacks off what Yvette said. What is your brand and how do you represent it? So give that some thought as we move on to the next question. Let's talk about predominantly white institutions versus HBCUs. I'd like to get everyone's perspective about, is the alumni network stronger in one versus the other? And is there a push from news outlets to seek out HBCU graduates at this point in time? Yvette, I'd like you to start.
I am a graduate of a PWI, predominantly white institution, Go Gators. And I've always longed for the opportunity to say that I was a graduate of Florida A&M or Howard. I think that the Gator Nation was a network that really got me my first job in television. I would not say one might be more powerful than the other. I would say that if you're a student attending an HBCU or a PWI, look around. The people who might help you get that first job or that next opportunity are probably in the class next to you or probably with you. So learn already, whatever campus you're on, to build a relationship, to start networking. It's not just, I was told University of Florida was a party school. It wasn't just the party aspect of University of Florida. I actually had to make relationships with the instructors and also with students. So I would not say one might be stronger than the other. I would say it's up to you to leverage the relationships of those strong networks at a HBCU and at a PWI. And I do think graduates from historically Black colleges have always been at the top of the hiring list, in my opinion. I've been with NBC for 27 years. And HBCUs graduates have always been a source for us in terms of looking to hire, not just at maybe some companies it's in vogue now, but HBCUs, if you knew anything about the quality of the programs at those schools, you were looking to knock on the door of Howard University graduates all the time, not just in this window.
All right, go Bison. Let me hear from Khaila. What do you have to say about that, Khaila? You're still on mute.
Yeah. So I attended, both Howard HBCU and Villanova of PWI, and I will say that it is what you make it. It is, what you do with the connections that you have. I have been helped by folks who attended Villanova and who attended Howard. I truly think that it is all about relationships with your peers, but then also not being afraid to reach out to people who seem to have a similar background to you. There have been times where I have done cold outreach to people because I knew that they attended my college or university. As a PR professional, sometimes I had to pitch radio stations, pitch newspapers, and I would scan a list and see, okay, maybe there's someone here who I have something in common with that I may be able to connect with in some way. So it is just all about how you approach that network and not whether or not one of them is stronger. So it's what you do.
Okay, I think that's fair. I'm going to move on to another question now, and I'd like to ask Charanna to handle this one. Do you see a fair representation of minorities in the newsroom? And how would you rate the efforts of the news industry to diversify on-air talent and employees? I know that you work in print, so maybe you could comment a little bit on both.
Well, honestly, from what I've seen in our newsroom, I can only speak of what's happening at the New York Times. Is I've been there for 13 years, and I will have to say, gradually over time, I've seen and pushed an increase in diversity in the newsroom. Is it where it needs to be? I wouldn't say that it's where it needs to be, but I would say that it's a lot better than where it was when I started in 2006. And the efforts of our entire newsroom to diversify, not just the newsroom, but also the business side, it's very important. And it's been at the forefront of everything that we've been doing for the last, I would say, 5 years, because what we're seeing in the newsroom is that when there is a lack of diversity in the newsroom, we see that there's opportunities that are missed for telling these amazing stories for communities that we want to touch and want to embrace, especially in the wedding section where I'm an editor. What we've seen over time is that people have created this mindset that the wedding section is a society section and it's for predominantly white, rich, successful people. And what we've wanted to do over time is to change that narrative. And we wanted to share stories of people of color who are also successful. We wanted to bring in the stories of people who work for themselves, who did not graduate from an Ivy League. So that was the main reason that was my goal coming in as an editor for the wedding section, was to make sure that we have that balance and we start to see our content represent the people that we want to serve. And it's been wonderful. I've gotten so much great feedback from people who are saying, wow, I see myself. And that's always something that makes me proud of the work that I'm doing, is that we get to change the narrative. By me being in the room alone, I get to change the narrative of the entire organization, or at least my section, that says that we are pushing to have more people of color represented, not just in the newsroom, in the business side, and in our content.
Terrific. I think that's great. I can't move off this question yet, although I see some good questions coming in here from our audience, which I'll jump to in a minute. But I have to ask you, Mindy, from the number of years you spent at the Miami Herald before you moved into book publishing here, can you talk to us a little bit about the representation of minorities in the newsroom and what progress you saw during your career at the Miami Herald?
Yeah, I think I think Charanna shows the importance of having a diverse workforce, because she is finding stories that reflect her own personal experience and therefore reflecting a huge part of the community. And I can tell you that when I left the Herald just a couple of weeks ago, nearly 50% of our newsroom is diverse. And that's, Hispanic, and obviously Black, Afro-Caribbean, and for us, Miami is is really quite a melting pot, and it's been at the forefront, I think, of change that's probably, 20 years ahead of what the rest of the country has been. I think the fact that I was hired, right out of college in the 80s, and then was able to climb the ladder there, is indicative of the kind of change that was happening and what the news organization was trying to respond to at the time. And it was clear that, we needed people with certain skill sets, language. When you say, a diverse Hispanic community, well, it's not just a monolith, right? So we need to represent also the different sectors, Cubans and Colombians and Nicaraguans and Venezuelans. And it's not just Blacks, but like I said, Afro-Caribbean, Haitians, Jamaicans, we need Puerto Ricans. So I think we really were focused on that. Having said all that, and I think we're probably doing better than most news organizations in the country, we're still not where we needed to be to really reflect the community. So I think that there was a big push in the 80s and 90s. I think there's a huge setback with the recession of the big recession of 2008 and the disruption of financial model of a lot of the traditional news organizations. And now I think there's been a restart. And so hopefully we'll see an acceleration, a much needed acceleration.
Terrific. Well, here, let's all hope for that. Let me jump now to a question from someone in our audience. And I'd like to ask everyone this, because this is a very interesting question. From when you graduated, what has been your favorite change or innovation within the industry? So that one might take a little time to think about, but let me start. Yvette, I'm sure you have something to tell us about change and innovation in the industry. What's been your favorite change that you've seen, or maybe that you helped usher in, knowing you? You're on mute. That's okay.
I got to share two really quickly. From typewriter to computer. Now that might be like, some people weren't even born when typewriters were around, but typewriters, because you would type out and you would use copy paper to write out the newscast, and then you would tape it together, page 7 to page 8, page 8 to page 9, and then you would roll it on the teleprompter. My first job in TV was operating the teleprompter. I was so happy to be in the same room where the anchors were right over reading the news. I was turning the knob and I was like, oh my God. So clearly, I went from page 1 to page 26, and the anchors, it was the worst show in the history of TV because I screwed it up. So clearly, getting off the typewriter and the paper system and going into the computer and having actually an internet. There wasn't an internet to do a Google search on something, right? So I would say that transition in technology really has been amazing in my 30-year career, to see the changes from something simple, VHS to, all the 3/4 inch tape to all the other things. But to witness the technology change has been actually pretty phenomenal.
Awesome. Shoshana, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I was just thinking that my favorite innovation was when I was in school, I learned how to take photographs on a digital, like a DSLR camera. And when I got to the New York Times, I covered Bridal Fashion Week from my cell phone. I took every single picture on my cell phone. I got my first photo credit for my cell phone. I would never, after all that training, they handed me an iPhone. So that would have to be my favorite graduation.
And Khaila?
So I think that when I first started out straight out of college, we would look through clipping books for PR clips. And that has just changed. We would get the clips every day and we would look through them physically to see, where our clients were mentioned. And that has changed. There's companies now that you click a button and you're able to, find all of the placements where your company was mentioned. Not just in print or in digital articles, but then also in social media. So you just have a wealth of information at your fingertips. And it's just so different. And I just marvel because it didn't seem like time was moving, but then clearly so much has happened in the time since you left college. But yeah, that would be it.
Great, thank you. And Mindy, let's wrap this little piece up here. What was your favorite innovation or change?
I'm going to say metrics and analytics. When I started at the Miami Herald, it was obviously print only. And so the assumption was that once a newspaper was delivered to the home, that everybody opened it. And then, of course, everybody read every story from top to bottom, cover to cover. And lo and behold, what we know now we're better able to serve our audience because we know exactly what people are reading. We know how long they're reading. We know when they stop. And I think it's also given power to the newsroom and journalists to be able to to write better headlines and SEO and bring readers to their stories. So I think that that's been the biggest thing is that we now have more control over the content and how to serve readers with the right content.
Terrific. All right, let's jump to another topic now. And let's talk about, with the trend of adding diversity and inclusion officers, in fact, we have two with us today. Do you think that the people in these jobs need to be people of color? What other qualifications must you have for this position? And I'd like to hear about that a little bit from Khaila and from Yvette. Khaila?
Yeah, I love this question. I personally don't think that chief diversity officers need to be people of color, but I do think that you should have the experience of being a member of an underrepresented community, whether that's a person with a disability or a person from the LGBTQ community. I think that having that lived experience of being from a marginalized group, you bring something to that position. So there are lots of schools of thought on this, but that's my feeling on it. But I do think, in addition to that, I think you should have a strong interest in social justice and the fair and equitable distribution of opportunity in powerful roles such as a chief diversity officer. How are you leveraging that pulpit to effect change and to drive representation and inclusion within the company that you work in? I would also say a willingness to listen and learn. We talk about allies all the time in the D&I space, and I think that this is a very critical part of being a chief diversity officer, of course, being an ally, being able to listen and learn whether you are a member, if you're not a member of an underrepresented community, how much are you willing to hear what other people are saying and telling you about their experiences, their lived experiences, and what they are going through within their day-to-day, and to just learn from that and be able to use that knowledge to impact and influence change.
Yvette, you recently took on this post. Can you talk a little bit about this also? I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, my time has always been in editorial. And up until July, when Cesar Conde, our chairman, asked me to take this role, I told him I didn't want this job because I've always felt that diversity, equity, and inclusion should be driven by leaders, period. Like that should be what happens. Doesn't mean that that is happening. So I understand the reason for the position. So, I did pause a bit on this job because it's away from what I know. I've not had any training as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I do have lived experiences, and I also have allies and advocates and co-conspirators who are with me on this journey. So it's not a solo thing for any DEI lead or person. Diversity and inclusion is not the job of that unit. It's a responsibility that we each carry. I think it's my job to be the facilitator of that, right? To help it be realized. How do you turn dialogue into action, right? And I think for me, the biggest thing is to, yes, be someone who listens, but who also learns. I think that invariably we fail when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion because people think diversity is it, but it is not it, right? Diversity might be who is seen, but equity is who has access to the room. And we have to really look at what are the barriers to access and how do we attack those? And inclusion is being seen, valued, and heard. And then also trying to figure out how to measure those things and understanding that inclusion can be measured and inclusion does show up. It shows up in inside a person. Like, how do I feel going to this job? It shows up in the relationships that you have with your coworkers. How am I treated? And it shows up in the organization, right? In terms of who's in the room, and so it has to have an end result. So I don't think, to Mindy's point, I think from earlier, I think there is not a finish line for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our demographics are constantly changing, right? So you can't say Monday, job done, we're finished. No, you always have to be fluid and flexible and recognize that demographics are changing, and not just view it in a black or white or race and ethnicity. It's so much bigger than that, right? Generationally, right? There are so many, geographically, there are so many other ways to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm in a period of learning and trying to leverage and understand that and talk to as many people as possible. I never assume, even though I'm the diversity officer, that I have all the answers. I look at it as a collaborative effort and trying to build partners on this journey.
Terrific. Years ago when I worked for IBM was one of the first companies to put in a diversity and inclusion officer. And the person I worked with there, he was one of the best I've ever worked with. And one of the things he said is, this job is to set certain things up. It never goes away. But if I were really successful on this job, everybody that was a line executive would be a diversity and inclusion officer. And I think, that's the continuum you try to move toward. It's not an easy thing to do because of all the changes that continue to happen, I would think. All right, I think those were great answers. Give you some food for thought, everybody. Let's move now to a topic that's been on everybody's mind this year, fake news. And let's talk about the news industry being under fire for fake news or extremely biased reporting. Let's talk about, what do you all think that needs to be done to ensure writing and reporting is factual and unbiased despite people's personal beliefs? I'd like to start with you on this one, Mindy.
Yeah, I had a feeling.
You knew I was coming for you.
Yeah. Well, one small thing I would say is let's lose the adjectives. I think that if you look at a lot of the reporting, even across the trusted news sources and some of the national media, I think that the combative nature, the necessarily combative nature of the relationship that the media has had with this current presidential administration has kind of seeped into some of the language. And I think that neutralizing the language, which is always like a key tenet of journalism, to use neutral language, I think we've lost some of that. We've lost our way a little bit in that front. And so, you can always read some of the articles and just start, Xing out some adjectives that probably shouldn't be there. And I think that would go. I think also, we are working to be, and I think the audience is now requiring us to be more transparent in how we're getting to where we're getting. But I will tell you that I found, at a regional newspaper, I found that, people would say anything national politics, that was fake news. And they would bring out that fake news card. But then you might say, well, do you think the score of the Miami Heat game yesterday was fake? And no, we don't think that's fake. And so do you think that the reporting from County Hall was fake? Well, no, that's not fake. And so we saw clearly a divide. Like, there's a lot of trust in our local reporting, in our state reporting, even in our foreign reporting. But when it came to political reporting, I think that there is such a divide that I think it's very difficult for one side or the other to really trust anything that doesn't align with political views. And so I think that's where and the fake news actually is, I think, a really terrifying call that has resulted in really dangerous working conditions for journalists, not just in this country, but foreign countries. So I think it's really an incredibly dangerous movement, and something that we have to really try as media leaders to really get a hold of and figure out how to rebuild some of that trust with our audience once again.
Great. I'd like to ask you, Shoshana, could you comment on that a little bit? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I recently did my first unconscious bias training, and what I realized that as a reporter, it's important to lean into your biases, because a lot of people, what I have experienced is we're all reporters, we're all editors, we're all in the field of media, but we're all living our lives as human beings in this world. There's a lot that has changed in 2020. This year has affected, especially as a Black reporter. We've seen for the first time Black reporters getting arrested while doing their jobs. We've seen some just really horrendous things that have happened this year that have kind of broken that fourth wall that we all try to stand behind. And I think that what I found, for me, what I had to do is address the biases that were there, that yes, this does affect me. And I don't think that I am the best person to speak on this or to write on this or to even edit this because of how I feel that it affects me personally, or my personal feelings may actually add to the storytelling in this case. I feel like a lot of times internally, we look at bias as a bad word, when actually it can be an opportunity for learning, for conversation, for discussion, where we can decide once that those things are out in the open, how to address a story, who to assign based on their experiences and things like that. So to me, that's my number one tip for addressing biases in the newsroom, is to not, hide it don't sweep it under the rug, but to discuss it and to make it a part of the conversation when assigning and editing.
Terrific. Yvette, can you comment or add a little bit to this tapestry from the broadcast perspective?
Yeah, I spent most of my career working in local news. And I remember covering politics in the Miami newsroom. And I wanted to know where reporters stood, and also covering, there was a shooting in a community, and I wanted to send a reporter to cover it. And I remembered a conversation with this reporter, separate day, separate topic, but it led me to believe that we sometimes tell journalists to be objective. But to your point, do you really leave your bias at the door when you're in that newsroom? I think sometimes we think, that reporters, they're not a person, they're a reporter, and they don't have feelings, they don't have emotions, they don't have, and I really think we have to lean into it, to your point, lean into it a little bit to understand. I want to make an informed decision about assigning something. I don't want to make an assignment and then find out later that, no, wait, this person feels that any shooting in a community of color doesn't warrant coverage because they don't watch the news and, right? So I encountered a lot of that in local news in terms of we don't cover those communities, right? And I would challenge the students. It doesn't mean when you say bring your full authentic self to work, right? It doesn't mean that you come in with a Breonna Taylor mask, or a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, because we had a panel discussion with some journalists and we said, you guys cover the civil rights, and you saw when the little girl was walking into the schoolhouse in Arkansas and you were attacked by the mob, but yet you still covered it. Why didn't you go and march, right? And join the march? So we wanted to get the perspective of journalists who lived through the civil rights to come in and talk to our current day journalists who were like, we are emotionally torn by what we're seeing happening in America, and we want to march and we want to be a part of it. So we really we said, let's take a step back and let's talk to some journalists who've been in that situation before. And they talked about the power of the media, the power of the word, the power of covering a story. Doesn't mean you're not impacted by it, but that there is so much power in your pen. There's so much power in illuminating and shedding a light on a story that sometimes being in the march, you cancel out your ability to be that journalist, right? Take a step back and be that journalist and reach more people and inform more people and educate more people. Doesn't mean that you don't have personal pain, but you say, you know what, I do have it, but this story needs to be told. And can I bring the right perspective to tell this story, right? And lose the adjectives, but tell this story in a powerful way, right? So I think you sometimes have to lean into that. And I don't think we're going to get it right all the time. But I think that's what makes this industry so challenging. And, I look at some of the words used in stories that were being covered where Black people were referred to as thugs, and dehumanized. And, that was powerful media covering the civil rights era. And I would say as a homework assignment, if you're ever curious, go read the 1968 Kerner Commission report. It talked about a series of riots in America in the 60s, 67, 68 in the summers. And the Kerner Commission report also talked about the media. It talked about the newspaper, and it talked about how they kept getting things wrong because it was not fully reported true. But some of the things that they guided the media are some of the things we're still wrestling with today. There's some of the same issues that they brought up. We're still dealing with it in newsrooms. And why? Because we're human. Because we're human.
Great. So now we've got a question from one of our audience members, and I think this piggybacks off what we've been talking about a little bit. I'm going to ask you, Khaila, what business practices help to recruit and retain talent from underrepresented backgrounds who maybe can help with some of these reporting issues that Yvette was just speaking about? Can you talk a little bit about that, Khaila? I think you're still on mute. There we go.
Yes, so I think representation is important, representation and leadership. When candidates see people who look like them in a certain position, a leadership position, they, feel better about that place as a workplace. And it helps to encourage, you have the lines of communication are open for mentorship, and feeling like there is a path for me here to succeed. So I think representation and leadership is incredibly important in helping to recruit and retain talent. And then it's about inclusion. It's not just about like who you see there, but about are their voices, are their perspectives being taken into consideration in the development of the products or services of this company. So, how is that process happening? How open is it, and how do people feel comfortable sharing their perspective I think that is critical in helping to retain talent. Like when that signal is there, other employees, entry-level employees, mid-level managers feel comfortable giving their perspective, and it also builds a sense of camaraderie within a workplace. I think we have at Comcast NBC Universal employee networks that are called employee resource groups, and they represent different communities. So there's the Black Employee Network or the OUT community. For example, there's the My Abilities community for people with disabilities and allies. And so, we built these groups to enable employees to have a place to connect with employees who are like them, but then also to enable and empower the employees to have a voice and to have direct input into things. So it's not just like a social group, but the power in numbers of being able to say, we have an opinion on how this product should look or should roll out or whatever it may be. And, with that power, you're able to bring your perspective to the table. So there are a number of things that at least we at Comcast do to recruit and retain, but those are just a few of them that I would name right off the bat.
Terrific. And Mindy, I'm going to ask you to comment on this because I think, as you pointed out a little while ago, I think the Miami Herald, while not all the way to bright, certainly did a good job of trying to move along with the community. Can you talk a little bit about how you hired and recruited people from underrepresented communities?
I think you have to be really intentional, and it almost ties in a little bit with, and I think you have to create a culture, I think Yvette said, where it's everyone and not just one person. So the managing editor, that was my partner in this, was a white Jewish male, and he headed recruitment, but we were on the same page, and he, together with him, we did a great job. I mean, he would, it starts with our internship program, which I thought was really the base. We had an incredible internship, and we made sure that every summer we were hiring a really diverse group of interns. Why? Because those interns then became the first group that we would look at when we were making hires later on, or either later that summer. And so if you start with that group, and then we keep tabs on certain people, and know that, keep tabs on them, keep in touch with them. And when we had openings that we thought were right, reach out to them. So the networking part of it was really important, but I think it was just being really intentional. And sometimes, and I'm sure my HR department would not want to hear this, I would just say, don't even bring me anybody unless it's a diverse candidate. I know HR, I don't work there anymore, so the HR people could be shuddering a little bit, but I think sometimes you have to be that adamant to say, this is what we need right now. And I would say, I know we need, there's certain gaps we have. We need more Creole speakers, we need people who speak Portuguese. We need, we need Haitians. We need Venezuelans. And I know that sounds, but that's Miami, right? So we really had to be very intentional when we looked at the pool of hiring, when we looked at the beats and the jobs we were trying to fill, and what skill sets we would really be best for those jobs. So I think that's why we were able to get to where we were. And again, I think, Yvette said it earlier, it's not just race and ethnicity, but it's age, it's geography, it's LGBTQ, there's so many things that, obviously gender. So a lot of things go into it. And I think that's why we were really, when I left, the last 18 hires we made, 17 were diverse.
And I actually wanted to tag on to that, Mindy. It looks like Angela's stuck. But yeah, we talk about diverse slates at Comcast NBC Universal all the time, ensuring that if we are making hiring decisions, the slate of candidates that we present to the hiring managers, it should be as diverse as possible, because people get into this into this process where they refer people who they might know, and they pull from their bubble, and that just creates it can perpetuate just the lack of representation within a company. So diverse slates is something that like we just always push hard for. And I think that it is a way, as you said, to just kind of help broaden the candidate pool.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm Ladora Brown, instructor of Elephant in the Room. Can you guys mute your microphone for a second? I hear an echo. I think we lost Angela for a second, so I'll take over moderating for the moment. We do have some great questions coming in from the audience. I wanted to get back to something I saw. How about this one?
Laura.
Are you back, Angela?
Thank you for picking up the ball. I got lost here, fell off the screen.
Okay, I'll remain on in case something else happens, but go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so did everybody hear my last question? Because I all of you froze and I couldn't see. So let me just repeat it really quickly. Over the years, different descriptors have been used to describe people of color. When a certain descriptor falls out of favor, often another one takes its place. For example, a number of news media recently changed their style guides and now capitalize the word Black, yet others do not. Who makes these decisions? Who should make these decisions? I'm gonna go to you, Yvette. I'd like to ask this question of you, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of these changes over the years in nomenclature. And could you talk a little bit about that? Style guides and how that comes to pass.
What's in depends on who you ask. But I do think, it's important to have people in the room to sort of decide when do we go from gay to LGBTQI plus A, right? And all the letters. So for us, we have a standards team. And we also have folks that we look at to say, you know what? We are reading and hearing a lot about Latinx, like when to use that. Is that acceptable to use versus Hispanic, right? And we know that race is a social construct, right? We had this discussion with Hispanic Heritage Month. Like, there are a couple of folks in our organization who said, we shouldn't use Hispanic, right, as Hispanic Heritage Month. So what I did was I went to several folks who were Hispanic, and I said, I don't want to make this decision myself. So I first will want to ask you if it's okay if I approach you and ask you for your opinion, because sometimes I don't want to be the one that people refer to. We have a Black issue, so let's go talk to Yvette, right? So I asked, do you mind if I ask your opinion? Like different people, generationally, different job levels. And I said, please let me know what you think. I also went to the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And I said, a couple of folks have raised this issue. Can you give me some guidance as to what your thoughts are about should we drop Hispanic heritage or drop using the word Hispanic? And we decided to keep it based on the feedback. There are actually some studies that folks referred me to about use of the term Hispanic versus Latin or Latino or Latina. So it's not one person making the decision, but I think you got to engage stakeholders in the conversation, right? If you're talking about people with disabilities, I think you should engage stakeholders in any discussion that you're having about what is the proper way or term to use. When we had someone use the term transsexual on our air recently, people around the table didn't know that was a word, a phrase they should not use. Had a conversation with GLAAD, and they said, okay, we'd be more than happy to come in and talk to a few of your team members to educate, right? So we try to do a lot of education and awareness. I can't say, Angela, when Negro became Black and Black became African American, I don't know, I can't follow all of it, but I do know that we are responsible for trying to be receptive to issues or concerns around language, because that's the business we're in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you raised some great points, because I think different people have different sensitivities on these issues. And so I think that what you recommended sounds like a great approach. Why don't we just ask them and then have a conversation? It sounds like a great way to do it. But I think another point is it really is not consistent across all different style guides, et cetera. So I think people have to think through that.
Well, and Angela,
I want to move now.
If I could just also say,
of course,
one big example of that was the recent nomination and now the election of Kamala Harris. We did an audit. I wanted to do an audit of our air from NBC News, MSNBC, CNBC, in terms of how do we refer to her. And there are some people who felt like, man, we're not saying enough that she's Jamaican. We're not saying enough that she's Asian.
Indian.
Yeah, right. Or Indian, right? So a lot of people were saying, like, you only refer to her as Black. And African American is really not a correct identifier, right? Some people say that wasn't a correct identifier. So I think we're going to have these issues of identity more and more, and the language we use. And I don't have the answer, but I'm just saying we got to be in a mode where we're trying to find the answer.
Yes, I think that's great. And maybe we should have one of our Howard alumni ask Kamala Harris, since she is a bison. So, but I think that that was a perfect example, because we see it all the time, even in the descriptors there. And I think it makes the job difficult to ask those kind of questions, but I think they have to be asked. We need to move on now, because we are coming up close to the end of our time. And I want to talk a little bit about some career advice for our audience, because I'm sure they're very interested in that. So let's talk about your advice to students who want to enter the news media world now, and what you all did at your respective universities that you felt prepared you the most for your career. And I also would like you to give me the other side of the coin. If you could do it over again, your college days, what would you have done differently? I'm going to start with you, Khaila.
So I started out thinking that I wanted to be a journalist. I love writing, and I thought that is what I would do. And going through college as part of the journalism program with School of Communications, I did an internship in an advertising company, and realized, this is a place where I could apply my writing skills. It was not an area that I had thought of before. I went on to do other internships at PR agencies, and thought, this is another place where I get to shape the messaging and, shape how people perceive things, and still use my writing chops. So I think that was very important for me, just to be able to have that varied experience, still within the field of communications, but to just not kind of pigeonhole myself into thinking that this is the way that it must be. And to this day, I know journalists, I've worked with journalists who have made the switch to the dark side, as they call it, have come over to public relations or corporate communications, and the skills are transferable, and it's just applied in a different way. So I would say that definitely expose yourself to as much as possible within the field, even if you think that you know what you want to do. Yeah.
This is where the job of the moderator gets hard. I'm going to see if I'm up for the challenge. I've got exactly 2 minutes left, and I've got a little thing I need to do at the end. So I'm going to make this quick. This is a lightning round. Charanna, can you please quickly just give us the answer to that question from your perspective? Give me 20 seconds. Go. What would you have done differently? You're on mute. You're on mute. Okay, Mindy, I'm going to move to you while Charanna gets off mute.
Okay. You know what? I think what I did right was I did a lot of internships, and I think that this business is a craft, and you have to do it to be great at it. And that's the key advice I would say, is go forth and do it.
Okay.
Think about, maybe I would have more fun while I was in college.
Okay, that's a good answer. Charanna, are you off mute?
Yes. Can you hear me? I'm off mute. Can everyone hear me?
20 seconds.
Oh, I would say the number one thing that I did as a student was that I just sought out mentors. I saw journalists. I was living in Washington, D.C., the home of so many great journalists, and I wanted to be a part of that community. So even as a student, I went to journalist networking events. And I went in as a journalist. I said that I worked for the Howard University television station, and I introduced myself and I asked questions about their beats and how I can become a better journalist. And I literally asked people, would you mentor me? So that is the number one tip. Find someone who's already in the industry and just be on their backs about learning as much as you can, even before you enter the workforce on your own.
All right, we're straight up 5 o'clock. We're going to have to leave it there. I'm going to give my last piece of advice. If any of you have questions or things you'd like to ask our lovely ladies on the panel, I'm sure you can reach out to them directly, and I bet you money they'll respond to you. So thank you for attending our Elephant in the Room panel series discussion on the news media industry. This completes our series. I know you all have tears in your eyes now, and we hope you've enjoyed it. If you missed any of the 6 panels, be sure to watch the recordings at inesivox.com. And also, please fill out the survey on our panel today for a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card. You can find the link to the survey in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. It's been so fun to be your moderator with all these great panelists today. And a special thank you to our alumni panelists for participating. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.